Hello guys, and welcome back to HJW Gaming and a continuation of my commander guides. In this video I'm going to be looking at one of the lesser used Dwarven commanders, continuing on with my recent theme, and looking at the Dwarven damage / support commander, Balin. Now Barlin, I feel, sits in quite an interesting niche in between the support side of the Dwarven commanders like Falgin or Ori, and between the damage dealers such as Dwalin, Gimli and of course Dane, in the sense that he has a mix of kind of both skills, which is why I think he's much lesser used than some of his counterparts, particularly Gimli and Falgin in that kind of tier 2 space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through his stats, gear recommendation and skill recommendations, as well as showing a few reports, just to show you guys what I think Barlin is capable of. If you enjoy this video, please smash the like button, and without further ado, into the video. Now first up, just to talk through some of Barlin's skills, we will look at his damage. So his base damage is 16 to 18, which actually is reasonably high. If we compare that to Ascended Dwalin, also in the tier 2 level, his is actually base level 14 to 17. So it's actually better than the tier 2 version of Dwalin. Obviously once ascended to Mythic that will get higher, but at the same level as my Barlin here at tier 2, Barlin's is actually higher, though it does sit slightly lower than Gimli's, of course, with 17 to 19, which is unsurprising. So he does sit somewhere in between Dwalin and Gimli as far as damage goes. His HP is reasonable at 77 per level, and his command actually is pretty large at 108 at this current level. If I look at some of the others, for example, he does have more, surprisingly, than Falgin, and obviously a lot more than all the other damage-dealing dwarves who are notorious for their extremely low level of command. So he will give a little bit more troop support than many of the other Dwarven commanders. As far as attack goes, he does have a reasonable attack at 0.6, though this is on the lower side for the dwarves, significantly lower than the massive 0.8 offered by Dane and less than the 0.6 offered by Dwalin, and also lower than 0.7 offered by Gimli, but obviously much higher than Falgin. But it's on the lower side, which of course, if you're building him as a damage dealer, is definitely a downside. It means you'll be more heavily reliant on the gear that you offer him to increase that attack. However, he does have a good defense value at 0.63. If we compare that to the other defensive commander in Falgin, it's actually exactly the same. So he does have a very surprisingly high defense. So you will see him being a lot more tanky, at least as far as commander damage received compared to the other dwarves. Of course, commander damage received isn't really a massive deal, as usually that'll only come in once your troops are dead, which often won't be the case. So commander defense isn't a big deal, but it's worth mentioning he does have decent commander defense. He also has decent focus for a dwarf as well at 0.36 per level, which is higher than all the other Dwarven commanders. Of course, because focus is almost not necessary for any of the Dwarven commanders, but Barlin actually does have some healing skills, and they do scale by focus, so it's very useful actually that Falgin does have a reasonable level of focus. Of course, this isn't great compared to focus commanders, for example, but it's still reasonable for a Dwarven commander, and it's the highest of the Dwarven commanders at 0.36 per level. And lastly, initiative. His initiative is actually extremely poor at 0.28 per level. This is actually only better, I believe, than Dane. I was also better than Gimli as well, but actually, so it sits in the mid-tier maybe, rather than extremely poor, but it's lower than Dwalin, for example, who's maybe particularly fast for a dwarf, but either way, compared to many other commanders, 0.28 per level, it's extremely poor for initiative, so don't expect your Barlin to be attacking particularly quickly. As far as gear goes, you want to be building him surprisingly still as a damage commander, so you will want to be using the standard kind of damage gear for for your damage dealing commanders. So the best, of course, in slot being the Axe of Khazad-dûm 2.0. Reason being that it offers a massive amount of attack, up to 48 when fully strengthened, and a huge amount of damage as well. This is always the best weapon for damage dealing commanders. If you're using Barlin as a secondary damage dealing commander though, which I suspect you will, it's likely you'll have your Axe of Khazad-dûm on another damage dealer, perhaps a Day 9 for example, or a Bjorn. In that case, you may want to look for another damage-dealing weapon. The second best in slot is the Black Bow, as this offers the second highest amount of attack and also damage once refined. But another good option as well, third choice within the flawless category, is the Blazing Tongue. The reason I always recommend this is, whilst it doesn't have the highest attack value, it does offer good damage with, I think it's 10 to 30 once fully refined. And you can particularly refine this often if you win a lot of seasons, as this is always available to be picked up in season end rewards. But the reason this is particularly good for Barlin as well is actually, unlike most other damage dealing commanders, that 22 focus is not going to waste. That 22 focus will actually help boost the healing elements of his skills. So Blazing Tongue in particular can be fantastic for Barlin. So yeah, just keep an eye on that, as it can, whilst I still like it for most other damage dealing commanders, it can be particularly good for Barlin. If you're looking into the exquisite category, the Battle Axe will be your best in choice, as it offers the highest amount of attack and highest amount of damage, so look no further than that. Into chest piece. Now, as always, this is a fairly mixed bag. As you're looking to push Barlin's attack as high as possible, in the 2.0 flawless space, the Berserker's Raiment will be the best, as it offers the highest amount of attack in plus 24. However, 1.0 gear will also do a good job here, such as what I've previously recommended. For example, the golden chest with Fine, which offers plus 5 attack to each refine. You can get massive amounts of attack out of this. Also, the Durin's Plate is very strong as well, which also can have some good effects on it. Basically, you're looking to get the maximum amount of attack on here. Bear in mind that whilst the 1.0 doesn't have HP, that's not massively valuable in PvP in the current game meta. However, if you're using it for PvE at the start of the game, for example, doing the one troop method, not having HP can cost you, as your commander will die a lot quicker. So I would recommend running the Berserker's Raiment. Now, often on damage-dealing commanders, I've seen a lot of people running, say, a High Elf Hauberk. Reason being is it offers unit defense at a time when, once you've got your attack over, say, 230, often that attack, as diminishing returns, is not worth scaling further. So people will run unit defense. With Barlin, however, I do worry that his attack stat is not really high enough to allow for that, so I do think you will need the additional attack from a chest piece. So I would definitely recommend an attack-based chest piece. As far as exquisite space goes, if you're looking for a 2.0 gear, Scale Mail is the best, as it does offer the highest amount of attack again at plus 15, and that's the main thing that we are looking for. But you could also look towards Rise to War Classic gear. You can use, for example, this Superior Hauberk I have here offers 30 attack and also a plus 15 unit defense, which can be very good for unit survivability. But the best in the 1.0 gear will be the Goblin armor, as that with Gallant fully refined can offer 54 attack, which actually is enormous, particularly when you compare it to the 2.0 Berserker Raiment. That is, almost 30 additional attack, so that is a massive amount of bonus of attack at the cost of HP. So the Gallant Goblin armor actually can be a fantastic choice. Now, into helms. The best choice here is going to be the 2.0 Cask of Pride. Reason being is it offers a huge amount of attack, again, up to plus 48, which will continue to up the damage of those physical damage skills, which scale with attack. Again, you get good HP as well, which can be useful, particularly at the start with PvE. The actual Rise to War Classic Cask of Pride can be used in place here as well. It offers a lower amount of attack, but does offer unit defense, which can be useful for survivability. Though, as I said earlier, as Barlin doesn't have the best attack stat, I do think the 2.0 version with more attack is best here, as we were trying to get his attack as high as possible to try and tip that kind of 200 to 230 mark. As far as exquisite helm go, the full helm is the best of the 2.0 offerings, offering a plus 18 attack. But if you have the Rise to War Classic full helm, this is pretty huge here as well. Of course, you don't get the HP once again, but you can get, when fully strengthened, up to plus 45 attack, which is huge again, and a massive jump up, particularly for purple exquisite level gear. Now, of course, you could also put melee vigor on that to get minus 6% melee damage, which is what I would recommend. So if you're looking to use purple gear, the classic full helm is the best option. For accessories, the best you're always going to get is going to be the 2.0 Palantir of Orthanc. Reason being, similar to the weapons, it offers the highest amount of damage and also the highest amount of attack. Another plus 48 attack will go a long way towards increasing that damage. And of course, as many refines as possible will increase your base damage as well. If you are using your Palantir, for example, once again on your main damage dealer, such as Dane, the second best choice is the Drums of Barad-dûr, which does offer the second highest amount of attack when fully strengthened, plus 36, and also a decent amount of damage. Whilst not 5 to 5, it does still offer up to 5 damage, and again, of course, increases as you refine. So I definitely recommend one of these two, with the Palantir of Orthanc being the best. You'll see as I got it on here, my Barlin, of course, is only level 5, so he will increase by 0.6 per level as I level him up. But say I got him up to level 40, he's still going to be sitting just over the 200 attack mark, which is not, not enormous. So I think this is definitely, you want to get the highest attack gear you possibly can. Accessory-wise, I didn't really talk about exquisites here. Reason being is no exquisite accessories offer that bonus damage, so they're almost not worth looking at. You always want to be using flawless options if you possibly can. Now into his skills, there's quite a few. He's got an interesting kind of array of skills here, so there's quite a few that kind of need to be looked at. The first one worth mentioning is Durin's Blood, of course, a constant across the Dwarven commanders, I believe. Being their highest damage skill, offering 700% damage to 1 to 2 enemy formations. Of course, if it hits 2, that's 1400% damage, which is absolutely enormous. That's a huge burst damage coming every 3 rounds due to the 2-round preparation. So it hit in rounds 3, 6, and 9 and hit that enormous amount of burst damage. In addition, it also offers a plus 10% skill damage just all skill damage in general, plus 10% for 3 rounds. So in the rounds where it's preparing, it will boost that by plus 10%. And when skilled to 10 skill points, it gains plus 5 attack. Basically, Durin's Blood is an excellent skill that synergizes incredibly with any damage-dealing Dwarven commander. So this will always be the kind of baseline for your build. Now, you will also want to skill this first when you put your skill points into Barlin. Reason being is this addition here, the skill damage dealt plus 10% for 3 rounds. You want this activating before any other damage skills so that you get that plus 10% activated and applied to those damage skills when you use them. So that will be the way to get maximum damage from Barlin. Now, talking of damage skills, his bottom respect 0 skill is his other damage dealing skill. He unfortunately has the same limitation as Dwarlin in that he only has 2 damage dealing skills, which does really curtail his damage dealing capabilities, as once he gets past a certain number of skill points, he can no longer really increase his damage. So he does, suffer from the same problem as Dwarlin. But Revivalist deals up to 300% physical damage to 1 formation and activates every 2nd round. Those who are wise on Dwarlin will note that this is actually a decrease compared to Experienced Warrior, being Dwarlin's respect 0 damage dealing skill. As this, whilst it offers 200% physical damage, it does deal it to 2 enemy formations, so it will deal 400% damage as long as your opponent has 2 formations left. So 300% being, of course, less than that. However, what you will get with this as well is you will get a modicum of support in a crowd control sense, with a 15% chance to inflict a stun on a target for 1 round. Of course, 15% is not a high chance, so it's not reliable. However, with this skill going off 5 times during the course of a full battle, if you go all the way to round 10. Of course, this skill will go off in rounds 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So going, 5 chances for this 15% activation gives you a good chance of inflicting at least 1 stun to 1 enemy formation during a battle. It's not massive, but if you hit the right target, this could still be useful. It also offers a small heal here, offers 70% HP to the commander's formation unit. Healing, of course, not being exceptional in Rise to War 2.0. This, again, isn't a huge increase, but it's still reasonable enough. Speaking about healing, he does have the Lord of Moria skill, which, for those who used him in Rise to War Classic, I think was his absolute, pièce de résistance, in the sense that he could deal damage and restore a huge amount of HP when he was using a retaliate weapon. Now that's kind of gone, this healing unfortunately falls by the wayside. Whilst it is a fairly strong heal compared to most commanders, it does rely on A, unit damage, and B, him having huge focus, which is not what we're going to be looking to do here. So each round, when small units deal their first instance of damage, you gain follow-up healing, which gives a chance to restore 330% HP to 1 allied formation unit. Again, scaling with the focus stat, and this can be increased to 60% 5 skill points and offers some base unit buffs at level 10. Now this, as you can see, is not a particularly strong skill, as we're not going to be scaling with focus because we're not going to have a high amount of focus. Those unit buffs, whilst useful, is not worth using 10 skill points. We won't be looking to put skill points into there. So what you'll be wanting to do is put all of your skill points into Durin's Blood, and then after that, put points into Revivalist. Once you get both of these skills fully maxed, you kind of have a choice where to go. I'd recommend going to his Respect 5, Warrior of the Lonely Mountain. Now this is another support skill, but it mainly revolves around increasing the attack and defense of your allies. Whilst 7 is not a huge buff, it's just enough that when you put a couple of skill points in, it can help. The main thing we're using him for is these 2 damage skills, but anything left, just chuck in there, and it could up the damage of your other damage dealer in his formation, for example, or assist with the defense of your support commander, but it's not really worth particularly talking about. We're mainly looking at his damage. Now, as far as relics go, his relic is the Moria Helmet. Now, this does increase his command, which could help a little bit with increasing that healing, but as we're mainly taking damage skills, what we're going to be looking at only is that commander attack. Of course, if you do have him ascended, it's maybe worth picking up and just not strengthening or refining, in my opinion, just to grab that little bit of bonus attack. Ancestral strength, in my opinion, is not a great buff again, so that's why it's not worth refining. Whilst a buff to his damage, if it was a flat buff, that would be excellent, but a 12% bonus damage only when being dealt to orcs or dragons is particularly poor, as orcish units aren't really meta, other than maybe the Crusher, just for the sense that it's a very cheap unit. Other than that, you don't really see orcish units all that often, so I just don't think the buff is useful. And of course, dragons doesn't help you in PvP, other than I'm not sure if the Cold Drake qualifies as a dragon, but again, it's not particularly seen often either. So I just think that buff is not really usable. So, refining or strengthening, I wouldn't really recommend with the Moria Helmet. Pick it up if you've got spare mithril, but I don't think it's your priority. Now, what commanders synergize well with Barlin? Now, in a formation with Barlin, if you're using him as a damage dealer, as I have here, I would always recommend running him with a support commander, particularly one with White Council, to reduce the amount of damage he and the rest of the formation takes. Always the best support to be recommended is Gandalf the White, due to having White Council and White Rider, but if you're looking for a backup support, Gandalf the Grey can also do a decent job here. For a second support, again, as most people know, the meta will always be Sauron, due to his ability to steal White Council and other skills through the Deceiver, and also his stat reduction on the enemy through his Respect 5 skill of the enemy, as I said. If you don't have Sauron available, actually, I could recommend using Falgin instead, as Falgin can operate as kind of a second or the main tank in your army, and also offer secondary damage reduction through his Respect 5 skill, Thrain's Guards. And of course, he synergizes well with Barlin, as the use of Dwarven units required by Falgin's Respect 5 skill, Thrain's Guards, actually can work very well with Barlin, as of course his bloodline does require use of dwarves, so he'll give them further buffs as well. So Falgin actually would be an excellent choice. Using Falgin and Gandalf the White together with Barlin would be excellent. And then I'd recommend another damage dealer. Of course, usually the best would be Dane Ironfoot. If you're looking to use Barlin in your main formation, that would be who I'd recommend alongside him. But other good choices for a secondary damage dealer, if you're looking for a second formation, could either be Dwarlin or Gimli, because again, using all of those Falgin supports, if you are using him, having Dwarven bloodlines can be great, but any other damage dealer will also do very, very well. Now, what units would I use on my Balin? On Balin, I would always be looking to use just a plain, tanky, cheap unit, and for that I would always recommend using the Guardian. Reason being that the Guardian, as I said, is not expensive, particularly on resources. They can script quickly, but they also have large amounts of HP and defense, so are an excellent choice just for their tankiness. If you're looking to use something, perhaps a medium unit, these can be particularly great, of course, as with the new discovery of how the counter mechanic works, if your unit on your formation counters the opponent's unit that they target, so say Barlin targeted an opponent's, let's pick a random commander, opponent's Sauron, for example, and the opponent's Sauron is using a small unit like the Berserker. If you're using a medium unit, you actually will get the counter bonus. So you'll have 10% less damage received, I believe it is, and 10% more damage dealt. So running a medium unit against opponents' small unit armies on your damage dealers can be particularly useful for increasing their damage. For that reason then, using medium units, another good option could be the Cataphract. Again, reason being, similar to the Guardian, they do have very high HP and defense, so are fantastic tanky units, though they do have a significantly higher resource and time cost, so these will be very expensive if you choose to run these in the long run. Another really brilliant choice is also the Shire Protector. Now, the Shire Protector is great on low command damage dealers because it basically does a reverse taunt and forces damage onto the other commanders around you and not onto the commander they're used on. However, I'd recommend using these perhaps on the other damage dealer that you use rather than Barlin. Reason being that his command is actually reasonably high, so you might want to say use a Shire Protector on Dane to avoid damage on him, and then use a Dwarf or Guardian on Balin. Personally, though, I think overall-wise, Dwarlin is a relatively poor commander. I'd probably put him somewhere around the E or D tier. I don't think he's as good as many of the other damage-dealing Dwarven commanders, as he simply is not focused enough on just dealing damage. As his stats suggest, he does need more attack and maybe better damage to make him more viable, and I don't think Ascension and getting his Relic is particularly worth it either. Whilst he can deal a reasonable amount of damage, someone like Gimli would be worth far better investment with exactly the same respect item, so I'd focus on Gimli instead, unfortunately for Barlin. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and please consider hitting subscribe, as I will be continuing my commander guides and trying to finish off all of the Dwarven commanders first before moving on to some of the others. And yeah, if you want to see some of those as well as my other guides in the future, you can get that through subscribing and hitting the bell. If you do, I greatly appreciate it, and I really hope to see you on the next one.